This book that I decided to read today, and it's called Arthur Writes a Story. I like to listen to stories. I like to tell stories. How about you? Do you like to listen to stories? Do you like to tell stories? Maybe even you can read some stories by yourself. That's always fun. Or have people read stories to you. Have you ever tried to write a story? Writing a story can be fun. Sometimes writing a story can be difficult. So in this book, Arthur has to write a story. And I wonder how Arthur does on his story. The author of the Arthur books is Marc. Have you seen other Arthur books before? There's lots of Arthur books in the library. Let's see how Arthur does in his story. Arthur's teacher, Mr. Ratburn, explained the homework. And he has it all written up on the chalkboard for the kids to see. His directions on the board say, write a story, have a beginning, middle, and an end, use details, be creative. There's his directions. What should the story be about? Asked Arthur. Anything, Mr. Ratburn said. Write about something that's important to you. Arthur started his story the minute he got home. He knew exactly what he wanted to write about. How I got my puppy pal. I always wanted a dog, but first I had to prove I was responsible. So I started Arthur's pet business. My mom made me keep all the animals in the basement. It was a lot of work, but it was fun until I thought I lost Perky. But then I found her, and she had 3 puppies, and I got to keep one of them. That's how I got my dog, Pal. The end. Well, that was a nice story. It had a beginning, it had a middle, and it had details. He even drew pictures. He's the illustrator of his own story. What did you think about his story? Well, Arthur read his story to D.W. D.W. is his little sister. That's a boring story, D.W. said. Does it have to be real life? Because your life is dull. I don't want to write a boring story, said Arthur. If it were me, D.W. suggested, I'd make the story about an elephant. That would be an interesting story, wouldn't it? Getting an elephant. The next day, Arthur read his new story to Buster. Did you like the part about the elephant puppies? He asked. It's okay, I guess, said Buster. I'm writing a cool story about outer space. Outer space. Arthur's thinking, maybe my story should take place on the moon, thought Arthur. We got the elephants that D.W. suggested, and the outer space that Buster suggested. On Wednesday, Arthur read his newest story to the brain. Scientifically speaking, elephants would weigh less on the moon, but wouldn't float that high, said the brain. You don't like it? Asked Arthur. A good story should be well researched, said the brain. Like mine, if I had a pet stegosaurus in the Jurassic period. Sounds like Brain has a pretty good idea. Look at all the collections he has there. Arthur hurried to the library. What are those books for? Asked Francine. Research, said Arthur. I'm writing about my pet five-toed mammal of the genus Loxodonta. Your what? Asked Francine. My elephant, Arthur explained. Oh, said Francine. I'm putting jokes in my story. All of his friends have different ideas, don't they? All through dinner, Arthur worried about his story. Please pass the corn, asked Father. Corn, that's it, said Arthur. Purple corn and blue elephants on planet Smelliphant. Now that's funny. Arthur is getting weirder than usual, said D.W. On Thursday, everyone at the Sugar Bowl was talking about their stories. Last year, a kid wrote a country western song for her story, said Prunella, and she got an A+. How do you know? Asked Arthur. That kid was me, explained Prunella. Mr. Ratburn said I should send it to the record company. It was that good. Wow, said Arthur. That night, Arthur's imagination went wild. He decided to turn his story into a song. He even made up a dance to go with it. And look at Arthur's imagination. Elephants with stripes, dancing and singing. Later, he tried it out on his family. Now this little boy can go home and enjoy his own personal striped elephant, and you will see how happy he will be here on the planet Smelliphant. Well, said Arthur, what do you think? And that's exactly what his family's doing. They're thinking about it. Mother and Father smiled. It's nice, said Grandma Thora, but a little confusing. Too bad you can't dance, said D.W. What am I gonna do, said Arthur. My story is due tomorrow. That night, Arthur didn't sleep too well. The next day, Arthur worried until Mr. Ratburn finally called on him. When Arthur's song and dance was over, the classroom was so quiet, it was almost spooky. Binky raised his hand. Did that really happen? What do you think? The story that Arthur told, did that really happen? Sort of, Arthur said. It started as the story of how I got my dog. I'd like to hear that story, said Mr. Ratburn. The title was How I Got My Puppy Pal, said Arthur. Arthur told how proud he was of his pet business, and how scared he was when Perky disappeared, and he told how happy he was to find her under his bed, and how surprised he was to see her 3 puppies. And the best part is, said Arthur, I got to keep one. Buster said, I like that story the best. Great story, said Binky. I think Arthur's story was the best, said Francine. Good work, said Mr. Rathburn. Of course, I expect you to write it all down by Monday. Then Mr. Rathburn gave Arthur a gold sticker. Oh, and one more thing, he said. I wonder what that one more thing is that Mr. Ratburn is going to tell him. Leave out the dancing. I guess Mr. Ratburn didn't care for his dancing too much. So which one of Arthur's stories did you like the best? I think the real true one about how he got his puppy pal, I think that was probably the best one. So that was Arthur Writes a Story. See you next time.